will be spontaneity. Same thing. S-P-O-N. You look at it. How do you spell it? S-P-O-N-T-A. Something like T-Y. I'm a good speller, but it's spontaneity. That's what dictionaries are for. If I ask you a question about eye contact, it would not be, I look over their heads and that gives me the illusion, that gives the audience the illusion that I'm looking at them. No, you look like an idiot looking up to the lights. No, I don't want that. You're establishing and maintaining some semblance of eye contact with each segment of the room. It may not be for 20 to 30 seconds at a time, but you're looking back and forth. It's not that difficult to do. Now, remember the different types of speeches. In this class, when you give graded speeches, is that an extemporaneous speech, an impromptu speech, or a manuscript speech? Exactly. Extemporaneous speech. Impromptu is where you have maybe a minute or 2 minutes of preparation time. A manuscript speech is something analogous to what President Reagan would do. Speechwriters write something for him and he gives the illusion that he understands the substance of it. Nothing against the president, but he always does not know the specific information. What? Smell like swallowing your tongue. What?
I had the same question.
Extemporaneous. Extemporaneous, that's the type of speeches that you do in this class. Impromptu are the type where you have maybe a minute or two of prep time. Then you get up to speak. Off the cuff. Manuscript is something where it's like writing 5 or 6 pages of a speech down in its entirety, and then in essence it's a reading exercise. You're just reading from the text of your material. Oh, by the way, on your tests, when you come in, try, if possible, to sit with this many people in the class. That's not going to be a problem. Try to sit in every other chair. I don't want to see people looking at other people's exams. I'm sure that wouldn't happen. You're not going to be using a pen. You're going to be using a pencil. I will give you both an exam and an answer sheet. When you finish the exam, you will hand in both the exam and the answer sheet. And you will get them back on. Get them back on.
You said there were multiple means, right?
Multiple gifts, giving away your style. A, B, C. Let's see. C was the last one, so it must be a B or D. Oh, B. Yeah, I've done that the past 2 on the exam. Yeah. What was your question? Oh, by the way, I'm not going to be a jerk on the matching either. There are. How many matching did I say there were? 8. All right. There will be 8 matching questions. You will not have 15 or 16 responses for matching. If there are 8 matching questions, there will be 8 possible responses. So if you're not sure, you can always fit one in if you're not sure of the last 2. Okay? I'm not that much removed from being an undergraduate that I don't remember the little tricks of the trade. If you're not sure of an answer. Let's move on here. And here again, on 126 and 127, this is not a voice and articulation class, nor is it a class in learning how one's throat works and what his lung works. I'm not concerned with any of that material on 126 and 127. It's nice to know, but I'm not an artist and I don't really care about that material. But look, on page 133, guidelines for practice. This is something that I mentioned to Nancy a minute ago. Here are the types of delivery. We have impromptu, memorize. By the way, if I mentioned on any of your speech outlines that they sounded canned, when I mean canned, they sounded more memorized and extemporaneous. If I see that on the next speech, I'm going to take off a couple of points for it because I don't want speeches which are memorized. I don't care how good it is, but that takes away from the aspect of conversationality. Invariably, you'll be halfway through the speech, you'll get to a visual aid, and you have the speech memorized word for word, can't remember one word, and the rest of the speech goes right into the tank because you can't remember where you are. It's almost like an actor who goes up on a line. 137 and 138, they're going through different types of practice procedures. You might want to remember those. Might be a question from there. How many main points did I say I would like for your speeches today? Not 4, not 5, but 3. If there is a question on the exam dealing with that, I don't want to see 4, I don't want to see 5, but the answer should relate in some form to 3. If it's true or false, or multiple choice, keep that in mind. Let's go on to Chapter 7, Principles of Informative Speaking. By the way, if you're a good speaker, or even if you're a poor speaker, do you have to totally eliminate nervousness to be effective? No, you don't. Even though I think that some people are going to say yes, no matter how much I stress that. Let's go on to 7, dealing with informative speech. As far as an informative speech is concerned, you want to make sure that your information is being clearly understood. Remember, you're almost like a mechanical man or woman walking down the center of a highway. You're not imparting your own opinions. You're giving the information. You're letting the audience decide what they want to do with that information. You're not taking a stand. You're acting more, in essence, here as a teacher or a lecturer. So you want to make sure the material is being clearly understood if you're a speaker. Remember that a visual aid, remember that a visual aid is a very good form of speech amplification. Sometimes you can give your ideas in as cogent and as clear a manner as possible, but sometimes the audience still needs to visualize it to really make sense of what's going on. For example, if I gave you an incentive to do well in this course, I may write an A on the board. Well, I wouldn't write it on the board because I don't want you to use the board in visual aids. Let's go on here. What I do want you to remember is to read the section from 150 to 155. And for those of you who are speaking particularly on Monday, take a look at the outline on 160 and 161. You see how they do it there? See how they do the introduction with the Roman numeral 1 or Roman numeral 2? And then when they get into the main points, boom, then they go back to 1 for the body. The only difference is, remember, I want to see transitions in between those main points and before the conclusion.
Do you want Roman numerals in the introduction?
Roman numerals are letters under here. For example, if you have 3 points you want to hit on in the introduction, you go A, B, C, or 1, 2, 3 over here. Same thing. All right, 4 questions from Chapter 8 dealing with visual aids. find out, won't you? If you have poster boards, or, by the way, some of the information I'm throwing out is not the test that I have right here. Some of the material that you use in terms of posters for speeches, let's say you have 3 visual aids, 4 posters, 1 blank, of course. Now, when you finish discussing one of the VAs, what do you do?
Copyright.
Very good. If you would like to use the chalkboard, should you?
No,
Why?
you said so.
Oh, it's good enough. Well, yeah, that's part of it. And the rest of it is the chalkboard is kind of messy, and sometimes, what is this? Web, plays, monos, big deals. What's 100 mean in Spanish? You forgot. Yeah, okay, well, there you bring that up. Let's go on. Anyway, let's talk more about posters. What did I say about, in this class, about using slides, or overhead projectors, or film? What did I say? Yeah, it takes too long. It's also a major pain, especially with 13 and 14 class. Ideally, I would not like you to hand out visual aids in class. However, if you have material, and I think Jerry had this with pictures after her speech, little Kodak-sized pictures, you can hand them out, but you don't hand them out until after the speech is completed, when he or she is answering questions in class. And remember, you show visual aids only when you're talking about them. If you have something which is small, hold it up like this so everybody in the class can see it. Let's go on here. I'm just going to take this right up to 4 o'clock. Those of you who speak on Wednesday, are welcome to stay if you'd like, but I want to talk to those of you who are here on Monday. So we'll take it till about 4 o'clock and then come back at about 4:15. Now, Chapter 9, dealing with processes. Most of this material I have covered before, but remember, when you're giving a speech in this class, especially for the first time, it's important that you have a thorough understanding of the topic, because first of all, it makes it much easier for me to come up here and talk. That is a really short chapter. On 185, you see the section on presenting the process. Read that portion that talks about how to choose the material, repeating the key ideas, work for audience participation. I'm not going to look at chapters 10 and 11. Why? Gee, I'm going to give away 2 questions here, almost. Remember what the descriptive speech is, and remember what the speech of definition is. You're getting 1 question from each of those chapters. I haven't discussed them a great deal, and I'm not going to hold you responsible for anything other than knowing what the definitions are. One reason 12 is important is because you're going to be doing something there that you're going to be doing not only for your next speech, but for your final speech as well, and yes, for the group discussions, which we will get to in about 2 or 3 weeks. Start talking about it. And that's using library resources. For your speeches, I don't want to see just material from interviews or personal experience. I want to see stuff from resources you would use from the library, where you would have to use the reader's guide or use the card catalog. Don't get lazy. Don't rely on just Time and Newsweek. Nothing wrong with that, but subscriptions can take care of a lot of library work. That's all we do. There is a specific way during your speeches that I would like your source citations to be given. And that would be something along the lines of, in the most recent issue of Wall Street Journal, or Stephen King, who is a noted writer, was quoted in 1985 in Harper's Essay, something like that. There's always a way where you can have specific source citations to the body of the speech. You don't always have to give the specific quotation. You do paraphrase. As a matter of fact, if you use direct quotations, usually it'll take between 30 and 45 seconds, and that shoots down one of your main points already. Did I talk about interviewing in here? Yeah, I wasn't sure if I have or not. Know the difference between open question and closed question when you're conducting an interview? That's on page 219. Middle of the page. It's in blue type. Know the difference between a neutral question and a leading question? If you're asking a tough question in an interview, you want to ask that question near the end. You don't want to do it at the beginning because you're going to lose whatever type of rapport you may have gained with that person. So if you have to ask tough questions, tough but fair, you don't want to be a jerk here. You want to do you beat your wife, that's a leading question. You do it near the end. You have a specific interview schedule of between 10 to 12 questions. And something I ask you to do in this class when other people are speaking, you also do it during an interview. This is page 222. You want to be courteous and you want to listen carefully. Listen to what the person has to say. Don't feel like you have to be stuck to asking that list of 10 or 12 questions. Why? Because they might say something that you didn't expect. Well, I committed 5 counts of arson in 1982. Well, let's talk about life in Japan or something like that. You have to be careful. Make sure you're aware of the impression you're making with the interviewee in a nonverbal fashion. Try to be interested in what they have to say. Last thing I want you to remember here is the section on 224 and 225. It's 2 paragraphs, and that is citing source material. That's a good-sized amount of material to cover. However, if you've taken good notes during lectures, you know probably the areas that I'm going to cover. Material that is covered both in lecture and in the book probably will be test questions. You are not, except in maybe 1 or 2 cases, are you going to get questions where there might be an all of the above or none of the above. For most of these responses, you will have on multiple choice 4 options, A, B, C, or D. Sometimes I may, if I can't think of a response, I may throw in something which is obviously wrong, and that way you have only 3 choices to choose from. A couple of things to remember here. I learned this a long time ago. Once you've answered a question, go on. Do not change the answer. Why? Because it's very simple. Those of you who have taken multiple choice know this. Sometimes, or most of the time, your first response is usually the best for what you think is correct the first time. If you're not sure of an answer, just go on, complete the test, and then go back and fill in those dead spots. If you're not sure what the answer is, and this is maybe you're running up here at the end of the period or something, go ahead and make it guess. It's not going to hurt you at all. Like I said, this test is not going to be tremendously difficult, but there are a few things that you're going to have to remember. None of the questions are the type where I'm going to try to intentionally mislead you. That doesn't help the process of education at all. But if you understand the material that I've talked to you about so far in terms of writing the speech, using source citations, understanding delivery, speech wording, listening, the channels of communication, encoding and decoding the message, you'll be all right. And remember, this again is a 50-point exam. The speeches are going to be worth 100. So if you don't do as well on this as you would like, it's no big deal because you still have 350 or 400 points still outstanding, with the magic number to be guaranteed to me in this class of 450. Any questions? And remember, makeup exams in this class are a lesson. They're that way for a purpose. It's unfair for people who don't do an assignment on the day's schedule to come in later and be accorded the same credit as everyone else. So any makeup exams in this class are all essayed and they're made intentionally harder. Questions? How many are supposed to give a speech on Monday? All right, I want all of you back between 5 and 10 hours. Those of you who are speaking on Wednesday can hang around if you would like to. Talk to me during the break, that's fine. But wait, before I hear the Russell books. Before those of you who speak on Monday leave, I want to hear at least one or two ideas from you. It may not be cast in stone, but it will be by Wednesday. As for exactly what you would like to discuss. The difference between the first and second speeches is rather short in terms of time allocation. It's a short turnaround time. You'll be watching the videotapes, getting into the group discussions, which are also another points of view, then into the final speeches. Those of you who work and can't get to class any other day than Monday or Wednesday, I'm usually in my office all day on Friday. But if you come into my office, don't just come and say, boy, I would like to help. Bring me something tangible on paper with that I can help you in terms of putting together the material in a way which I think will help you best. Don't just come into me with ideas. Bring me something down on paper that I can use a lot of red ink on. Okay?
This is a 5-minute speech. This is 5.
What's this? Traffic cop? The time limit on, what did I say the time limit was? 4 to 6? Okay, 4 to 6. Ideally hit for a minimum of 5. If it goes a great deal over 6, I'm going to dock you, because with 13 people going on one day and 12 on another, you're going to be repeating a lot of the same ideas, and your speech is going to have a nicer flow to it if you hit your points and then move on. But yeah. For your final speeches, the time limit is 6 to 8, but I want that bumped up as close to 8 minutes as possible. Even though there's a final exam in this class worth 50 points, in essence, as far as I'm concerned, your final speech will be your final exam to a degree, because you're going to be putting together all the information I've asked you to do this semester, and I think that's the most important of the three. Okay, is there anything else? Well, since I spoke for a few minutes, let's get back together here at about 10 hours. Those of you who are speaking on invariably going to distract from whatever you're going to say. I can tell people all I want that you shouldn't do it, but what was it? I think the last class I taught, somebody was talking about child abuse. And they had a number of photographs, small photographs, they didn't blow them up, which I didn't care for, which showed explicit photographs of child abuse. During the speech, he goes over and hands on, so you hand these to the people in back. So it takes about 3 minutes. People are looking at that. He's going on talking, and people aren't paying any attention to him because of that. All right. So when they're used correctly, visual aids will enhance the understanding of your speech. They're very important in that regard. When you have a drawing or a poster, let's say you're drawing something like a chart, make sure that it's large enough for everyone in the class to see. Invariably, I sit in the back when speeches are given, just like I did the other day. I want to make sure that all the visual aids are large, and I also do it to make sure that you're projecting as well. couple other things here, and I'm going to let you go early because those of you who haven't talked to me about your speeches, I want you to bounce some ideas off of me before you leave class. When do you not use a visual aid? You never want to use a visual aid in terms of what I call redundancy, where you're using a visual aid just for the sake of, well, what the heck, I'll just use one. I'll give you an example. Let's say that you're giving a speech on, last year there were 60,000 people in the United States who died as a result of drunken driving. And you say that in your speech, 60,000 people died last year as a result of drunken driving. And then you say, let me give you an example of what I mean. Pull out the blank poster and you see, sure enough, 60,000 people died due to drunken driving. Well, that doesn't really add to the comprehension of the speech. What you might say is this is something that can result from the effects of drunken driving. And then you show an auto accident. You don't want to, it takes place a great deal here too. You don't want to show people laying there, with blood all over them. You want to be very selective. So what do? In a case like that, you might show the blood on the pavement, but you would never get so gory as to show the actual people themselves. And you may laugh when you hear that, but I've had it in the past. This is where audience analysis comes in very handy. You can come up here and be as persuasive as possible, and a visual aid can destroy the impact of the speech because you didn't pay any attention to the taste of the audience. In terms of taste, I mean, the gag factor. Somebody sees that and they get visually ill. So you're very selective, you're very subtle. You show the blood on the pavement, but you do not actually show the person himself. All right. Now, before I hear a lot of rustling of books, I am going to let you go a little bit early today. How many of you have not given me topics for speeches yet that I've approved? Don't be afraid to raise your hands. Go ahead. All right. I want you guys to stay for a few minutes. And it's not like detention or anything, because I want, if you have any ideas, if it was like high school, detention, excellent. I want you to bounce some ideas off of me before you get out of class. Now, this is the last discussion or lecture as such until about 2 weeks from today, when I hand back the critiques. I'll talk about them, and I'll talk about chapters 10 through 12 of Vertiver, and then talk about a couple of other things as well as we get ready for the midterm exam. I want to stress, if at any point you're not sure of what you're supposed to be doing in terms of a specific purpose for a thesis, the worst thing you can do is hold off on like coming up to my office and seeing me. I'm usually around. If I'm not in my office, I'm usually in the TV studio. If I'm not in the TV studio, I may be in the radio production facility. For a lot of you, this is the first speech you've given in a long time. Understandably, there may be a little bit of apprehension, but I want to try to make the atmosphere as conducive as possible for a series of good first speeches. So if you have any problems, have any questions, let me know. Call me in my office if you're at work, something like that, and I'll be happy to talk to you for a couple of minutes. So those of you who have already given me your topics for speeches, I'll see you on Wednesday. But, one more thing. I would imagine I might have a couple of opening things to say about the setup for class a week from today in terms of format, that type of thing. But we will start at approximately 5 after 3. I want to make sure that each person gets in their speeches, so I'll have time to make comments about your speaking styles, and also, again, I don't want to just be me, I want you to use some ideas as well. So, those of you who have given me your topics, you can go ahead and take off. I'll see you on Wednesday. And those of you who haven't, hang around for a few minutes because I want you to bounce some ideas off. This starts approximately on page 14, where our esteemed speech therapist Vertiver talks about responsible public speaking. A lot of this is common sense stuff. He talks about the legal responsibility. Don't yell fire in a crowded room, even though I did ask Michael and Hermilo to break up the Spanish class because we're running long. Ethical responsibilities, again, it's kind of common sense stuff. Don't worry about it. However, some of this material that I will throw out to you is not going to be on the exam, but I'm not going to tell you exactly what the exam is. So some of these ideas I throw out to you may be red herrings. Let's talk about public speaking as communication. It's on page 4. I talked about this briefly at the beginning of the semester, where we have the source, the message. A couple of things from chapter 1 I want you to remember, and that is in terms of encoding a message, E-N-C-O-D-I-N-G, encoding a message, and decoding a message. I spent a lot of time on this too. You as a speaker are going to be sending out a particular message to the audience. But those people, through their biases, through whatever they've learned at school, through their frame of reference, may not interpret that message the same way. So there is a distinct difference between message and meaning. On pages 8 and 9, there is material dealing with noise. I talked about internal noise and external noise. External noise being you're up here speaking and all of a sudden there's an explosion outside. Well, it's very difficult to pay attention to the audience. As far as internal noise, you may be trying to concentrate on what someone is saying during the speech, but the problem is that you may be thinking about what you're going to have for dinner or certain ideas running through your head or music or something. That's an internal noise, type of internal noise. Remember that, and also remember this. If you were up here speaking in front of the audience, and all of a sudden you see people yawning, or they're going like this, back and forth like they're almost asleep, what is that called? What?
Another thematic language.
What I'm looking for is something called feedback. Close. Why do I stress feedback? Very simple. Especially in a persuasive speech. If you're starting to give a certain idea and the audience seems to be shaking their head and they don't seem to be agreeing with you, that's where you pick up on the nonverbal communication with the audience. Something that has been a test question of mine in the past, it won't be this time because I haven't stressed it that much, but if there is ever a conflict between the verbal signals you get from someone and the nonverbal signals, you always take the nonverbal as true. On page 10, there is something called, what is it, a model of public speaking as communication. I defy anyone to try to understand what that is. Usually PhDs for their dissertations are putting these models together, and you need almost a meeting of the mind to understand what he's trying to do here. If you can understand that, fine. You can write a paper on it for extra credit in another class. What is the most difficult form of public communication? What did I say during the first class session about 40% of people being scared of doing something? What was it? Public speaking. Thank you. Okay. Public speaking. That's right. And again, forget this garbage of 14, 15, or 6. No, it's not garbage. I can't do that. The First Amendment of the Constitution guarantees certain types of freedom. It's very important, but we're not going to hear about it now. Let's move on to chapter 2. Listening speeches. Remember on page 22, what factors determine listening level? Sounds like a test question. Understand what is characterized best by good listening. You'll find that material on pages 27 and 28. Also remember that there is a distinct difference between hearing and listening. For example, along the way here, I will be dropping hints to you. Ideally, you will all get them on the test, but invariably some people will miss because they weren't listening as closely as they should have. Another thing here, and this is, for instance, it's either on 24 or 25. Make sure that when you're listening to a speech, I don't care whether it's an informative speech, listening to a process, or persuasive, you're going to withhold your judgment until after the person has spoken. Never judge the quality or content of the speech on what you think yourself, especially in a persuasive speech. Because to do that is to have a prejudice against that idea, and to prejudice anything on the basis of that is stupid. Get off my soapbox. Let's move on. Remember that when you're listening to speeches, you listen to them critically. You don't always have to take notes to remember a speech. That's something Reppert brings up. What you want to do is listen to the key ideas which are being presented and remember those. You have to remember that you as a speaker can have the greatest speech in the world, and invariably by the time you're through, the audience is only going to remember between 25 to 50% of it. And 25% is being more accurate. 50% is on the high side. The book is next, right? All right, let's move on. That's the speaking order for speeches on marketing. All right, let's move on to chapter 3. Now, remember what I said. The bulk of the material that's going to be asked here is in chapters 3, 4, and 6. When you get on to 9, 10, and 11, they're like 8 or 10 pages apiece. Selecting topics. Remember what a specific purpose is. Can someone tell me what one is? How about a thesis? Well, even if you're timid now, those are two important things that I want you to remember. When you're writing a speech, what do you write first?
Body.
That's right, body. Who said that? Okay, things are usual. Okay, writing your specific purpose and your thesis statement. Remember those two things. Something that I mentioned before, we can't do it a lot in here because we can't take the scientifically random stratified audience analysis here. However, one thing that you ideally should do is to analyze your audience. Phrase the thesis and your speech in terms that the audience is going to understand. I mentioned audience adaptation in here a great deal. It's very simple. You have to appeal to the ego of the audience at the outset, and you may lose them. For example, I may say, you might want to take notes on this, because if you don't, you're not going to do as well on these things on the exam as you should. And remember I talked about demographics, the age of the audience, the sex of the audience, occupation, income, race. Those are all things that you have to keep in mind. Remember, when you're giving a speech, I don't care how simply you break it down. The audience is hearing this information for the first time. You want to put it in simple terms that they can understand. Not that you're being pedantic. This is the first thing I'm going to discuss. Not like that at all. Okay. Finding material, that's on what? Page 55. I want you to read that section. They talk about a number of things here which can add life to your speech. Examples and illustrations, anecdotes and narratives, statistics, comparisons and contrasts. One thing I want you to remember about statistics, this is very important. You should never try to mislead the audience when you're giving statistics. A prime offender of this is the National Tobacco Institute. I mean, a lot of people don't really die from smoking. They die from related causes. Sure, we're not stupid, but they try to manipulate facts to put things in light which is most beneficial to them. They talk about visual aids on page 60, but I'll get into visual aids on chapter 8, so don't worry about that right now. On page 62, you see what's at the top of the page? You're not going to be responsible for this on the exam. But I've had people in both classes do this, and I was glad to see it. It saves on time going to the library. When you write down the information, you only have to go maybe once or twice, put the information on note cards. That way you can be at home, collate the information, and you won't have to go back and forth all the time. Let's go into chapter 4. This is organizing speech material. And gee, there are 9 sections in this chapter. And it's very simple, the reason why. We're talking about preparing the body of the speech here. Stuff that I've talked about a lot before. How do you select main points? The substructure of your speech. I spent a great deal of time during one of the lecture sessions talking about the different types of orders you could use for a speech to put main points together. And there were 4. Time, space, topic, and problem solution. Look at the materials in the book here dealing with each of those. Very possible there'll be questions on that on the exam. Where would you use time order? You'd use it on a speech describing a process. Some type of sequential order. For example, if you were going to tell us, give me an example, give me some speeches in here. What did we do? Tell me, give me some examples for speeches. Who spoke on what? Listen to all the responses.
With my topic, how to write a term paper, and pick a topic first, then research, then write it. That's
Okay. Let's have some others. Oh, did you do the sun catcher? That's what it was. And you went through the, I know it. You went through the sun catcher. Did you use a time order on that? Seems like you did. Oh, sure. But anyway, what I'm thinking of using a time order is that you're using a chronological order. We start at the beginning, we go through all of these steps, and then we have a finished product. Well, there are some that are different from that. For example, the topic order. I gave the example of the different functions that the president performs. He's commander-in-chief of the army. He is chief of the executive branch, and he does something else I can't remember right now. Remember those 4 types. I'm not concerned about problem solution yet because you'll be doing that to be the final speech. On page 75, you see something called the rules of outlining. I see you use complete sentences for major headings and major subdivisions. Remember that? There are 2 sections here on preparing the introduction of the speech and preparing the conclusion of the speech. Read those as well. It's always good at the beginning of a speech or sometime in the body, particularly for your first speeches, to use something which is what I call the personal reference. What do I mean by a personal reference? For example, in a first speech, if you're an expert on the subject, you've done it before, it's much more easier to get into a conversational tone. I know about this subject, I'm an expert on it, that's why I'm qualified to speak with you about it today. Yeah, I mentioned that just before you got in here. The idea of appealing to the audience at the outset. far as an introduction is concerned, on page 78, they have suggested introductions. Remember the different types. You have a question, a startling statement, or an anecdote and a narrative. And it was nice to see in this class as well as the other one. Each of those types were used at the outset of speech. Some of you still need to work on that. I was hearing from a couple of you, and I mentioned this on your outlines, just like out of nowhere. If you haven't wanted to talk to you about music stands, I'll be looking at them in the following three areas. That pretty much covers what I want to talk about in that chapter. It's the last few pages here has a complete outline structure. If you're never exactly sure what you're supposed to do on a complete outline structure, remember, it's Roman numerals and subpoints. For the introduction, it would be like A, B, C, and then the transition, and then Roman numeral 1 is your first main point. Some of you are having Roman numeral 1 as the intro, and then Roman numeral 2 for something else in transition, and then Roman numeral 3 is your first point. Well, I'm not Randy Nelly. I don't want to use a roadmap to get through your speeches. So try to conform to what I'm asking for. Make sure your main points are Roman numerals. Chapter 5 deals with the actual wording of the speech itself. First thing I want you to remember here is something that I call Reppert's law of proportion. When you're having an unequal balance of time allocation to each main point. And a couple of you had this. I mentioned it on the structure on your outline. One person had 7 subpoints, I think it was 7 subpoints under one main point. Well, that's a speech in itself. So you have to remember, when you're in a situation like that, you want to cut out some of the irrelevant material and group the rest of the material together. He talks about something here called connotation and denotation. 96 and 97. I'm not really concerned with that as much. The only thing I was concerned with along this line I have assigned to you in Chapter 1, which is the encoding of a message and the decoding of a message. And forget this. Remember that we don't have to be Howard Cosell's in here. You don't have to speak in polysyllables. And that's why the segment on clarity is important. You want to You want to speak precisely and not make mistakes like I just did. You don't want to lose the audience. I talked about this too. I went over and picked the core waste can, and then I pointed up here. What am I pointing toward? And you weren't sure. Remember that you want to phrase your terms as concretely as possible. That's page 100 in terms which are both specific and concrete. You run into a problem on this later on because you can't do it as much. When you're trying to persuade the audience to do something like, well, let's clean up our roadsides, or let me tell you what the correct meaning of life is. So that's a little tough question. Do you have a question? Oh, you're just doing stretching exercises. Remember what vividness means. What do I mean when I say parallelism? Might want to skip back on this. I believe it's on page 71. Phrasing each of your main points. What did I say? Well, that's part of it, but I'm looking for something a little more. What what I'm looking in terms of parallel phrasing is that ideally, if you can, that each of your main points should start with the same type of wording. Who built the house? No, you did the one of weights. Who gave the speech on building the house? Tell me what your main points were.
Side work.
Okay, the first step in building a house is side work. What was the next one? The next step in building a house is laying a foundation. What was the third step? Third step in building a house is wood frame. Gets the job done. You don't want to mislead the audience. The first step is this, the second is this, and the third is this. Remember that, and remember what I said about vividness. What's a transition? Exactly. Now, for our purposes in this class, at least for the first two speeches, they do not have to be complete sentences. It can be as easy as first, second, third, or summing up, in conclusion, something along that line. Why is transition important? Very simple. You have to let the audience know exactly where you're going with the structure of your speech. That's a lot better than having some type of vocalized pause. What's my term for that? Vocalics. That will be a test question. There's one point you can get for sure. By the way, no points are allowed to be negative, so if you can't get that right, that's probably bad. All right. He talks about different types of transitions here, internal and external. I'm not concerned about those now, but I will be for your final speech. So don't worry about that right now. But something which is on page 111, I've mentioned a lot, and I want to make sure that you remember this. This may not be a test question, but remember this for your speeches. The use of personal pronouns. Getting the audience interested in the speech is more than saying, you should be interested in this. Say it more than once. This is something you would like. We get along better this way. So you're getting the audience involved by including them. You will do better on the test if you listen to what I tell you to today and during the past 5 weeks. This may seem very basic. And I know I mentioned it in the other class, and I'm not sure if I mentioned it in here or not. That's something that's on 114. Never in this class, during speeches, do I want to hear language which sounds sexist or racist. All right. Let's move on to chapter 6. Now, there are a lot of questions in this, too. There are, 7 questions in this chapter alone, okay? And this is what I was dealing with before. I forgot when I taught public speaking in the past. This quote, this was always in the first chapter of the book. I had a guy from Wisconsin, Lucas. But the study that I was thinking about is quoted right here, where it says 40% of people are afraid of public speaking. I think 18 are afraid of sickness or death or something like that. Can you cope with nervousness? Sure you can. It's not easy. Ideally, you should use a tape recorder beforehand and practice before your family or your mom and